Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. My name's Luke. Today we're going to be talking about live performance, the three kinds of live performance that I've done. I've done over the years, as far as performing with synths, and primarily the push is what is my main sort of instrument. I've sort of done three variants of live performance. I've performed live in front of people, as in on a stage. I take this rig with me, plug it into a PA, and do live performance. I've performed live in front of cameras with lighting and things like that, which then gets streamed. I used to go to a friend's place. They had sort of a warehouse sort of motif with a lot of lighting and things like that. We'd put on a show, but it would get streamed out, and then there'd be a few friends there, local spectators, right? But basically live at a venue, live in front of a camera, and then since the pandemic, right, live here in the studio. And I have just picked up a few things that work for me that I thought I would share with you guys. They're really questions around how you build your rig, how you build your system, how you decide what you're going to do for your performance. Questions that you need to answer before you can really, get it done. Is it the only way to do it? No, it's the way that I do it. You can always just, take your phone, put it on a tripod, point it at you, hit live on YouTube, and go to town, right? But I'm going to talk about some of the creative aspects and also a little bit about sort of the technical aspects. This is not going to be a demo on how to stream, how to use OBS, how to use Wirecast, any of those things. There are way too many good tutorials out there on that stuff. But I will tell you what my setup is as far as describing it. And then, your mileage may vary based on what your experience is going to be, what kind of gear you want to use, things like that. Okay, so let's get started. So as I said, three kinds of live performance. What I'm focusing on here is getting your audio and some video out on a stream or captured to, a feed, or, maybe just set it up. I've performed in a bunch of galleries, art galleries, local places, little art studios, things like that. So there's some decisions you need to make, right? What are you performing? The content. Do you have a slot in sort of an open mic night and you've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes to do something? Is it just you? Are you the only name on the bill and you're going to do an hour's worth of music or 2 hours worth of music? Are you collaborating with people, right? Or is there someone doing like a VJ thing? You got some visual artists doing some projection art or things like that. Or do you have musicians you're collaborating with? You have to decide what is the content you're going to be performing. And content for me falls into four categories, okay? The first is something I've written and is done. Like I've got a track, I released it, it's a complete track. And the whole point of this performance is to reproduce that track as perfectly as possible for a performance, okay? I generally don't do that for live performances because that typically involves just lip syncing or finger syncing to a backing track that you just press play on. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And especially if you're doing, a huge venue where the producers are like, this can't go wrong, it has to be perfect. That's why there's a lot of pressure put on artists to do that, among other reasons. I generally don't do that, so I'm not going to cover that here. But know that I don't consider you a bad artist if you do that. There are reasons why that might be useful. So whatever, be that as it may, let's move on. The more common sort of approach I take is, depending on what kind of music I'm doing, sometimes I will do prepared parts plus improv, right? And this is basically, I've got a song that I had previously written, and I'm going to actually use backing tracks or playback sequences of the individual instrument parts for almost all of the instruments, and then I play the lead or the main melody or something like that, right? I don't have a band behind me. And if you do, great. You've got a duo or more. You can assign those parts and go ahead and perform live. But for a lot of computer musicians, people doing synth things driven by a DAW or driven by hardware sequencers, what you end up doing is selecting out of your arrangement. These are the things that are going to just play from start to finish, A to B, on this song. And there's going to be gaps that are muted or not playing, and I will fill those by playing live, those parts. Okay, and this takes some practice. All of this takes practice. But that's sort of the second way to do it. And you can have a really great experience, especially if you're real transparent with it. You don't need to say or even imply to your audience that it's anything other than I'm playing along with my backing track and you're going to see my performance. This is especially true if you sing, like if you have lyrical content, like just playing that backing track, and doing a solo or two and then singing for the rest of it versus in chorus or whatever, that's totally valid and they will love you for it. All right. So don't worry about that sort of stuff. So prepared parts plus some improv solos, right? The prepared arrangement. And the way I do that is I generally set it up in Ableton where my scenes are specifically set up already. So like, here's the A part, here's the B part, verse, chorus, B verse, something like that, coda, whatever. And then you just trigger scenes going through this. Now this is Ableton centric, using whatever tools you want to do, hardware sequencer or otherwise, you can follow this same basic pattern. Okay. But you sort of prepare the framework of your songs. All right. And then you mix a reproduction. You're letting certain tracks just play sequenced. And then you're putting in existing sort of improv elements. I'm going to play this melody line, or I'm going to do some soloing, something like that. All right. That's another way that I've performed live. A third way is to do what I call live arrangement, okay? Where maybe you're not comfortable playing. Maybe you are strictly a composer and you paint your notes. You build patterns in clips and you paint them into the sequencer and then you let that stuff play. Or you are a generative musician. You do ambient or Berlin School or some kind of music where there's an element of controlled randomness in your stuff, algorithmic sort of behavior where you have a machine that you've built or a set of scripts or tooling that you've built up out of the system. And it isn't just straight sequences that you're going to trigger. It's what I call live arrangement. You've got segments of living parts, right? You've got this little sequencer is driving this synth over here, and it's got a pattern loaded into it. And this sequencer is driving this stuff over here, or these clips, right? You could say this clip these are all in, say, the same key, but this is one bass part, this is another bass part, this is a third bass part, and you're going to arrange these live, right? You're not going to actually do any performance. You're going to be mixing and matching parts, combining them together, right? That's another sort of approach for doing this. Live's very good at it. And as are many other DAWs, right? But so there's a distinction between having prepared parts that you solo over or improv over and doing a live arrangement where you've got prepared parts that you trigger and put together like puzzle pieces. And every performance can be slightly different because those things could be algorithmically generated or doing some sort of controlled randomness thing, right? Prepared sonic elements, and you're arranging them live. Okay. And you want to have a plan generally and an order you're going to work through, but you're not locked into that. You can sort of vary things around. All right. And then lastly, something that I've demonstrated in another video, I'll link in the corner, is like a purely live improv sort of like a live looping situation or live improv where you start and there are no clips, nothing is prepared except your instrumentation, right? And then you start your beat going and you record the first loop and it starts playing. And then you move to the next instrument while that first one is playing and you layer the second instrument onto that, and then the third, and then the fourth, and however many you're going to do. I generally do 8, usually 8, 12 at the most, but you can do as many as you like. and you build up a sequence, a series of these clips that build on top of each other. Now, this is a little tricky because you have to pay attention to the timing and your sort of decision, I call it your decision hesitation phase. Like I record something and then that loop starts playing. And now I'm like, okay, I have to layer something on top of that with another instrument. Well, while you're trying to figure out what you're going to play on there, if you hesitate too much, that first loop is going to get really boring and repetitive to the people who are listening. So you have to sort of go in with an idea of saying, okay, I'm going to be in A minor. I'm going to do this bass line that riffs around A for the most part with a few extra little grace notes. And then I'm going to put some chords down on top of that. And then I'll have a harmony line, and then maybe I'll have a lead line. And you sort of follow a pattern. But once you've built up your sort of scene of these patterns that you've built live, you go back to the beginning. And while patterns 2 through 7 are still playing, you stop pattern 1 and record a new one there. And you build up a series. I call it sort of like spiral evolution of your set or your song, right? You build up horizontally a series of patterns that play on top of each other. And then you go back to the beginning and you start building variations on all of those things that eventually play on top of each other. They end up replacing the first patterns. And then you do it a third time and a fourth time and a fifth time, and you end up developing this long series of clips that are all variations. And then once you've got a set of these, you can go back and start triggering. You actually flip back over into the third option, which is live arrangement, and you start triggering older patterns to mix with the newer patterns that you made. Okay, so these are some decisions I make around content before I actually go and do this performance. I have to decide, what is this? Is this a reproduction? Is this prepared parts plus improv? Is this live arrangement with a set of known clips? Or is this pure improv where I'm going to build all these clips up from scratch and layer them as I go? All right. So that's step 1. Figure out what you're going to be doing, what format. The reality of what you're probably going to do is a little bit of several of these, right? It's nice to have prepared parts. You could have a scene, right? One setting that's just prepared parts that you know exactly what's going to happen, right? This is where the voiceover happens, and the old man voice tells the opening story of the performance, and he sets the character and the mood. And then we're going to go into a set of clips that are live arrangement, where these are prepared clips, and I'm going to start triggering them in some way and building up some tension there. And at some point, I may solo on top of that, but I'll record that solo into a loop, and I'll save that loop, and I'll be able to call it back later as a callback to earlier motifs in my performance. Okay. It's generally a bit of both. All right. So let's listen to, let me give you some examples. Okay. All right. So here we have a little live set, and you could consider this like prepared, right? I've got a little drum beat here that I'm just going to let run. Let's do this. All right. So this is not going to be the world's greatest performance. I'm really not putting a lot of effort into this. This is more of a demonstration. So you've got this beat running, okay? And then I've got some instruments here, and I want to do something with these instruments, right? Well, here I've got prepared clips. I pre-recorded these clips, to look at these. Let's see. Right. Let's look at my clip here, and we'll start this playing. All right, so this is a clip. I prepared it. All right, it's in a particular key, in a mode. Actually, what key and mode are we in? We are in F minor. Okay. Right. So now I'm doing live arrangement, right? I've got these prepared clips, and I'm going to bring them in. And I could be going over and reaching, touching the synths. Let me do this. There we go. Now I can hear. Right, so I'm bringing in these parts. I am arranging on the fly and adding these prepared parts. And I don't necessarily have to do them linearly. I can start moving things around. Depending on the mood of the audience and what's happening, I could jump out and jump ahead in time. Right? You could bring parts in and out, right? Again, this is just live arrangement. Or you could treat this as live sort of predetermined arrangement plus soloing, right? I can select this instrument that I have no clips for and decide to just play. Right, so that's a live arrangement, right? I've got these clips already defined. I'm going to trigger them, and then I may solo on top of them, right? So it's a bit of playback and a bit of improv, all right? But I could, let's say we deleted these, and we started with nothing, just this drum clip, right? And we could do a live looping situation where I'm going to build up patterns from nothing and build up sort of a set of patterns and then do live arrangement, right? So let me very quickly build some patterns here. But imagine this was in front of an audience. So we go, there's our drum beat. Right, and we'll just go. So now that clip's built, we want to add something on top of it. You want to quickly get there. You don't want to hem and haw too long. Right? Now we want to put a bass under that, for example. We'll just do a drone. And maybe some kind of arpeggiation here. We'll do this one a little longer. So at this point, we've recorded 4 clips. So this is live improv. Now what we could do is we can go back to the beginning, to this summit patch, and we can replace this pattern with something else. But it's got to work with the existing things. Go. Now this pattern is long enough that I could probably let this repeat a few times. So now I've given myself some time to think, figure out what I want to do next. So this bass patch, I would probably go adjust it a bit. It's a little too slow incoming, but anyway. So I think you get what I'm talking about. You could start with nothing and then live loop and build up clips. And then once you've filled up your bank, your scene, you have all your instruments doing something, or just the ones you want. You go back to the beginning. You start replacing them with new patterns. And then once you've got a table full of these, you could just go back to live arrangement and start triggering earlier patches, earlier patterns, and combining them with later ones and see what happens. Okay. Now, so that's the sort of compositional overview of how I do live performances. Okay. I either have a set of clips as scenes and they're prepared and we just play them, right? And I fake it, which I've actually never done, but there are reasons why you might want to do that. All right. Or you've got playback of a backing track and some synth that you solo. Right. You play the primary melodies, or whatever the sort of hooks are. You play those live while the backing tracks, the backing clips are playing. Right. And then additionally, a third way is you can have a set of pre-built clips ready for you to mix and match and arrange together to build your performance. And I find that is most useful when I'm doing things that are generative or contain some sort of pseudo randomness or controlled randomness, because, I know that this clip is going to run some Euclidean sequencer that's going to give me an interesting pattern, but I can't predict necessarily what it's going to be, right? So you constrain them to a key and a mode and things like that. But you can then combine that with something over here that does something else that's not super predictable, but still constrained enough that they'll play nice together, right? And then you mix and match your pieces to build this sort of, you can do it so that every performance is unique if you want. All right. And then lastly is just sort of a live looping approach where you build up a slow burn of patterns in instrumentation laying on top of each other as sort of layered patterns. And then once you have a full set, you start building down, doing variations until you've got it. And then, there's some practice involved with how do I open a song doing it that way? How do I close a song doing it that way? Or am I just going to perform for 90 minutes? It gets tricky. How do you want to do tempo changes, things like that, if you want to do key changes or modulation? There are techniques for doing that that I'm not going to cover right here, right now. But global transposition is one of them. I have a bunch of videos on that. All right, so that's sort of the compositional approach stuff. From a technical perspective, how do I do this? Well, when you're going to be streaming or doing a performance, if it's live, if it's on stage, you just need to be present, right? And you give them an audio feed to the house PA or whatever it is. You just perform, right? If you have to do your own sound reinforcement, you'll bring your own PA or amps or whatever, but you'll feed a stereo feed out to there and go. If you're performing in quad, which I did a few years ago, you'll send four streams, 4 channels out, right? But if you're going to be streaming, first off, I recommend you practice. If you're going to stream, it's easy enough. All the streaming software, you can just say, instead of streaming it, record it to my disk, right? And you basically do your performance, and then you review the recording of what you did, right? That's a good way to practice. And you can see where are there gaps, where am I hesitating, where are the pieces of arrangement that are tricky, and I maybe haven't given myself enough time to make all the transitions smooth or change the patches on the synths that I'm using. Do I need to automate that stuff? These are things you want to think about when you're doing dry runs, when you're practicing a bit, right? But as far as streaming is concerned, you'll need to feed a video feed and ideally a stereo audio feed. Most of the streaming software, OBS, I'm on a Mac, so I use OBS or Wirecast. OBS is free, Wirecast is not. There are reasons why you might want to use one or the other, but OBS does a great job. I highly recommend that. You do have to read the manual though, okay, because it's not, or find some good YouTube video tutorials on how to use OBS. But and that takes some setup. You have to get into sort of video composition, like how do I get these sound source and these video sources together? How do I get them onto a page, onto basically a screen a screen diameter or whatever, 1080p or whatever resolution you're going to be streaming at. How do I get them in there? How do I compose it so that, if you've got a multi-camera setup? I use iPhones. I don't trade my iPhones in when I upgrade every few years, so I have a collection of a few iPhones. And I just use them as cameras. But, webcams, whatever, desktop capture. You take those video sources and you merge them together in OBS, and then you also capture your audio. And those get synced up and go out as part of your stream. But like I said, I'm not going to cover the technical aspect of how to use that stuff in this. But that's what I do, right? I use a piece of software that aggregates video and audio together, and then you shoot it out. I generally stream to YouTube. I've done Twitch once or twice. The sort of larger community group that I've been in, they generally do Twitch. And what I do is I send them a feed and they reflect that back into the Twitch sort of stream server stuff, the intake service. Let's see. I'm trying to think what other sort of technical, if I'm glossing over anything you really want to know, ask questions in the comments, okay? Because I'm happy to answer them, but it's like a hole with no bottom. I don't want to bore you with a whole bunch of minute details you probably already know if you've experimented with any of this stuff. But the way I do it generally is prepared patterns or live looping. That's basically what happens. That's about it. I know this isn't a very exciting video, and the music isn't amazing in this one. I'm sorry, it's just sort of ad hoc slapped together. But I think if you're going to do some performances, you need to answer those early questions. What is the actual content you're going to be performing? What's its format? And how are you going to present it, right? Is it backing track? Is it backing track with some performance over it? Is it a generative sort of live arrangement of pieces of the puzzle that all fit together and each one sort of drives itself? That really lends itself well to modular or DAW-less stuff, because everything, you can have all these little sequencer brains everywhere doing their own thing. Or are you going to do a live looping sort of situation? And then each of those sort of examples you can mix and match, right? So you can always have, your vocal track be live, right? Or if you're the composer of it and you had a collaborator, a young man or young woman, someone who did sing vocals for you, if they're not here, well, guess what? Their vocal track is the backing track, right? And you just make it clear to your audience that it's not you, you're not lip syncing to that. It's a sample or it's a pre-recorded track that you have triggered and synced in. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't fear that. And if you can, ideally go get that performer to come back and perform with you, right? I think that's about it. Again, ask questions if I have anything specific, but I think that is all I'm going to say today. Oh, it's really hot in this room right now. I've got the fan off. Oof. Okay, I'm done. As always, thank you for watching Synth Seeker, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one.